Mark's eyes opened to sunlight streaming through his bedroom window, and for a moment, everything felt normal. Then he heard the sound of someone moving around downstairs. His heart lurched. Emma was supposed to be at his sister's house for the weekend sleepover. He dropped her off yesterday afternoon before the school mixer. So who was in his kitchen? He sat up too quickly, and his head spun. His mouth tasted like cotton, and something bitter he couldn't identify. The digital clock on his nightstand read 8:47. He tried to piece together the previous night, but everything after 7 o'clock was a blur of fractured images. The school gymnasium decorated with string lights, parents standing in clusters with plastic cups, Ms. Chen smiling at him from across the room. Then, nothing but fog. Mark pulled on sweatpants and moved quietly down the stairs, his pulse hammering in his ears. As he reached the kitchen doorway, he froze. A woman stood at his coffee maker, her back to him, wearing one of his old university shirts. The shirt hung loose on her smaller frame, falling to mid-thigh. Her dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she was humming something soft and unfamiliar. She turned around, and Mark's breath caught. It was Sarah Chen, Emma's third-grade teacher, standing in his kitchen, wearing his clothes. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw him. "You're awake." "Good. I was starting to worry." She held up the coffee pot. "I hope you don't mind. I made myself at home with the coffee. You're going to need some too." Mark's mouth opened, but no words came out. His brain was trying to process too many things at once. Why was his daughter's teacher in his house? Why was she wearing his shirt? And why couldn't he remember anything after arriving at the parent-teacher mixer? "I know what this looks like," Sarah said, setting down the coffee pot and raising both hands in a calming gesture. "But I need you to take a breath and listen to me. Nothing happened the way you think it did." "What way do I think it happened?" Mark finally managed to say, his voice rough. "Because right now, I don't know what to think. I don't remember. I don't remember anything after getting to the school last night." Something flickered across Sarah's face. Concern, maybe. Or was it fear? "That's actually one of the things we need to talk about. But first, coffee. And you should sit down." Mark didn't move. 3 years of being a single father had taught him to trust his instincts. And right now, every instinct was screaming that something was very wrong. "Where's Emma?" "Still at your sister's house. You arranged the sleepover yesterday, remember? You wanted her to have fun with her cousins while you went to the mixer." Sarah poured 2 cups of coffee and brought one to him. "Please, sit. I'm not going anywhere until we talk." He took the cup automatically, more out of confusion than anything else, and sat at the kitchen table. Sarah sat across from him, wrapping both hands around her own mug. In the morning light, he could see the exhaustion on her face, dark circles under her eyes, a tension around her mouth that suggested she hadn't slept at all. "Start talking," Mark said, "because I'm about 5 seconds away from calling my sister to come get me and figure out what the hell is going on." "You had 1 glass of wine last night," Sarah began. "I saw you nursing it for the first 20 minutes of the mixer. Then you started talking to Mrs. Patterson about Emma's reading progress. About 10 minutes after that, I noticed you weren't looking well. You were swaying a bit. Your words started slurring." She paused, her fingers tightening around the mug. "That's not normal for 1 glass of wine, Mark." His stomach turned cold. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying something was wrong. You aren't drunk. You were acting like someone who'd been drugged." The word hung in the air between them like something toxic. Mark's hand shook slightly, and he set down his coffee cup before he could spill it. "That's impossible. I only had 1 drink. I got it myself from the refreshment table. Nobody touched it." "Are you sure about that?" Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. "Did you set it down at any point, turn your back, get distracted?" He tried to think back, but the memories were like trying to grab smoke. "I don't know. Maybe. There were a lot of people there, and I was trying to be social for Emma's sake. She's been asking me to meet you outside of parent-teacher conferences for weeks." He looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and saw something in her expression that made his chest tighten. "You're serious? You really think someone put something in my drink?" "I know it sounds crazy, but I've seen it before, Mark. I grew up in a college town. I know what it looks like when someone's been roofied or given something they didn't consent to." She leaned forward. "When I realized what was happening, I found you in the hallway outside the gym. You were barely coherent. You kept trying to find your car keys, insisting you needed to drive home. I couldn't let you do that. So you drove me home." Mark's mind was racing now, trying to fill in the gaps. "And then what? You just stayed the night?" Sarah's cheeks colored slightly. "It wasn't like that. When we got here, you were in bad shape, disoriented. I helped you inside, and you immediately went to the bathroom to be sick. Then it started raining. Not just raining, that storm last night was intense. I got soaked helping you from the car to the door. She gestured at the shirt she was wearing. You told me to grab something dry from your room while you showered. You said the drawers were clearly labeled thanks to your late wife's organizational system. The mention of his wife hit him like a physical blow, Rebecca. She'd been gone for 3 years, but her presence was still everywhere in this house, in the labeled drawers and color-coded closets, in Emma's laugh and the way she tilted her head when she was thinking, in the way Mark still sometimes reached for her side of the bed in the middle of the night. I'm sorry, Sarah said quickly. I didn't mean to. It's fine. Mark cut her off, but his voice was tight. You were soaked. You grabbed a shirt. That makes sense. But that doesn't explain why you're still here. It's morning. The rain stopped hours ago. Sarah's expression shifted. She looked down at her coffee, and when she looked back up, Mark saw something in her eyes that made his mouth go dry. It was the same look Rebecca's oncologist had worn when she'd told them there was nothing more they could do. The look of someone who has to deliver news that will change everything. I stayed because we were talking last night, Sarah said quietly. Before you started feeling sick. Do you remember any of our conversation at the mixer? Mark pressed his fingers to his temples, trying to force his brain to cooperate. Bits and pieces. You asked about Emma, about how she was doing at home. I remember thinking it was odd that you seemed so concerned, because her grades are good. She's doing well in school. Her grades are excellent, Sarah confirmed. But grades aren't everything. I asked about her behavior at home because I've noticed some things at school. Things that worry me. What kind of things? Mark felt his protective instincts kick in, sharp and immediate. Is someone bothering her? Is she being bullied? No, nothing like that. Emma's well liked by the other kids. But over the past few weeks, she's been withdrawn, quiet. She used to be the first one to raise her hand in class, but now she barely participates. During recess, instead of playing with friends, I found her sitting alone more than once, and she's been having nightmares. Mark's breath caught. How do you know about the nightmares? She told me. 3 days ago, she came to school exhausted, and when I asked if she was okay, she started crying. She said she keeps having bad dreams and doesn't want to bother you with them because you work so hard and she doesn't want to be a burden. The words felt like a knife sliding between his ribs. Emma had said that? His 7-year-old daughter thought she was a burden? He'd been trying so hard to be enough for her, to fill the space Rebecca had left, and somehow his little girl had gotten the idea that she couldn't come to him with her problems. If you're feeling this story so far, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart. Because what happens next, what Mark discovers about his daughter and himself, is something every parent needs to hear. Last night, Sarah continued, her voice steady but laced with emotion, you told me things you'd been noticing too. How Emma's been saying strange things lately. How she asked you last week if you ever wished things had been different. How she's been extra clingy, but also extra careful, like she's trying not to cause any trouble. You were worried, Mark. That's why you actually came to the mixer. Not just because Emma asked you to, but because you wanted to talk to me about it, and you didn't know how to bring it up during a formal parent-teacher conference. It was true. All of it. The memories were coming back now in jagged pieces. He'd been carrying his worry about Emma for weeks, watching her change in small ways he couldn't quite articulate. The way she'd started apologizing for everything. The way she'd stopped asking for bedtime stories. The way she'd look at him sometimes with an expression far too old for her 7 years. Okay, Mark said slowly. So we talked about Emma, and then someone drugged my drink and you brought me home. You stayed because of the rain and because you wanted to make sure I was okay. I get all that. But Sarah, it's morning now. You could have left hours ago. You could have called my sister to come check on me. Why are you still here? Sarah's phone, which had been sitting face down on the table, suddenly buzzed. She glanced at it, and all the color drained from her face. Sarah? What is it? She picked up the phone with trembling hands, read something on the screen, and then looked at Mark with tears suddenly filling her eyes. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I stayed because I was waiting. The school's crisis counselor called me around 3 in the morning. I've been up all night, waiting to hear back. Waiting to hear what? Mark stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Sarah, you're scaring me. What's going on? She stood too, still holding her phone, her knuckles white around it. I'm so sorry, Mark. I thought we had more time. I thought maybe it was a false alarm. or that your sister would handle it and we could talk to you this morning when you were clear-headed. But this text, her voice broke. We need to go, right now. Go where? Mark's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Sarah, where's Emma? What happened? Sarah met his eyes, and in them, he saw a depth of compassion and fear that made his legs feel weak. We need to go to the hospital. Your sister called the crisis counselor last night. It's Emma. She had a breakdown, Mark, a bad one. And there are things she's been holding inside. Things about your wife's death that... She stopped, swallowing hard. She needs you. She needs you right now. We have to go. The coffee cup slipped from Mark's hand and shattered on the floor, but he barely heard it. Emma. His Emma. In the hospital. The room tilted, and Sarah was suddenly there, her hand on his arm, steadying him. Breathe, she said. I know this is terrifying, but Emma's safe. She's with your sister and the hospital counselor. But she's asking for you. She's finally ready to talk about what's been hurting her, and she needs her dad. Mark looked at this woman, this near stranger who'd somehow stayed up all night in his kitchen, waiting to deliver the worst news a father could hear. Who'd worn his dead wife's organizational system to find a dry shirt. Who'd noticed things about his daughter that he'd been too buried in his own grief to fully see. Keys, he managed to say. I need my keys. I need to get to her. I'm driving, Sarah said firmly. You're still recovering from whatever was in your system last night, and you're in no condition to drive. My car's out front. Get dressed. We leave in 2 minutes. Mark ran for the stairs, his mind spinning with terrible possibilities. Emma in the hospital. Emma having a breakdown. Emma holding on to secrets about Rebecca's death. How had he missed this? How had he failed to see that his little girl was drowning? As he pulled on jeans and a shirt, his hand shaking so badly he could barely work the buttons, he heard Sarah's voice drift up from downstairs. She was on the phone, her tone professional but urgent, telling someone they were on their way, asking about Emma's condition, confirming that the counselor would be there to help facilitate. Mark grabbed his wallet and phone and thundered back down the stairs. Sarah was waiting by the door, car keys in hand, her expression calm despite the urgency of the situation. She'd somehow managed to find a pair of Emma's leggings from the laundry room and pulled them on under his shirt. She looked ridiculous, incapable, and like the only solid thing in a world that had just tilted on its axis. Let's go, she said. And Mark, whatever happens at the hospital, whatever Emma tells us, you're not alone in this. I'm here. The school is here. We're going to help her through this, both of you. He wanted to thank her. Wanted to ask why a teacher he'd barely spoken to was doing all this for his family. But there was no time. Emma was waiting. His little girl needed him. So he just nodded and followed Sarah out into the bright morning, into whatever truth was waiting for them at the hospital, into the conversation he should have had with his daughter months ago, but had been too afraid and too broken to initiate. The door closed behind them with a soft click, and Mark sent up a prayer to a God he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. Please let her be okay. Please let me be enough to help her. Please don't let me lose her too. The drive to the hospital felt like it lasted both seconds and hours. Sarah drove with calm precision, her eyes focused on the road, while Mark sat in the passenger seat, his knee bouncing uncontrollably, his hands gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Every few seconds he'd check it, hoping for an update from his sister, but the screen remained dark and silent. Tell me what you know, Mark said finally, unable to stand the silence any longer. Please. You said the crisis counselor called you at 3 in the morning. Why would they call you and not me? Sarah took a breath, her hands steady on the wheel. Because Emma asked them to. When your sister called 911, Emma was in crisis, but she was also terrified that if you found out, you'd blame yourself. She specifically said she didn't want you to know until someone could help explain it to you, someone who understood. Understood what? Mark's voice cracked. Sarah, I'm her father. Whatever's happening, I should have been the first person they called. You're right, you should have been. But your sister made a judgment call based on what Emma was saying in the moment, and the counselor agreed to give her a few hours to stabilize before bringing you in. Sarah glanced at him quickly before returning her eyes to the road. They were also worried you might still be impaired from last night. Your sister knew you'd been at the mixer. I called her around midnight to let her know I had you safe at your house and that you were sleeping it off. She was grateful, but I could hear the stress in her voice even then. I think she'd already gotten a call from Emma. She was already worried. Mark tried to process this. His sister Jennifer had known something was wrong with Emma, while he'd been unconscious in his own bed, poisoned by God knows who at a school event. He felt useless, worse than useless. He was the parent, the one person who was supposed to protect his daughter from everything, and he'd failed at the most basic level. He hadn't even known she was suffering. At the mixer, Sarah continued, her voice gentler now, you told me things that concern me deeply. You said Emma had been having nightmares about the accident, that she'd been asking strange questions about the day her mother died, that she kept saying things like, if onlys, and it's my fault, but would close up whenever you tried to talk to her about it. Sarah's grip tightened on the steering wheel. I've been a teacher for 8 years, Mark. Before that, I spent 2 years volunteering at a children's grief center. I know the signs of a child carrying trauma they're not equipped to process. I saw those signs in Emma weeks ago. Why didn't you tell me? The question came out sharper than Mark intended, edged with pain and accusation. I did tell you, not directly, but I've been trying to. I've sent 3 emails over the past month asking to schedule a meeting to discuss Emma's emotional well-being. You responded to 2 of them saying you were too busy, and the third you didn't respond to at all. There was no judgment in Sarah's voice, just fact. I wasn't trying to overstep, but I also wasn't going to ignore what I was seeing, so I reached out to the school counselor, Mrs. Rodriguez, and we've been working with Emma during lunch periods. Gentle conversations, art therapy, creating a safe space for her to talk if she wanted to. Mark felt like he'd been punched. He remembered those emails. He'd seen them and told himself they could wait, that Emma's grades were fine, so whatever the teacher wanted to discuss couldn't be urgent. He'd been so focused on keeping their routine stable, on making sure Emma ate healthy meals and got to bed on time and had clean clothes and help with homework, that he'd missed the fact that his daughter was breaking apart from the inside. She told Mrs. Rodriguez some things, Sarah said quietly. Not everything. Children who've experienced trauma often test the waters before they fully open up. They share a little bit, see if it's safe, and then share more. Emma told her she felt guilty about her mother's death, that she heard some adults talking at the funeral about how Rebecca wouldn't have been on that road if she hadn't been picking Emma up early from school that day. Mark's vision blurred with sudden tears. He remembered that day with horrible clarity. Emma had called the school office, crying, saying her stomach hurt. Rebecca had left work early to get her, even though Mark had been in an important meeting and couldn't leave. She'd been on the highway heading to Emma's elementary school when a semi-truck driver fell asleep at the wheel and crossed the median. The impact killed her instantly. And yes, if Emma hadn't called, Rebecca wouldn't have been on that road at that moment. But it was an accident. A terrible, senseless accident that no 7-year-old should ever blame herself for. Who said that? Mark's voice was barely a whisper. Who said that at the funeral where Emma could hear? I don't know. Emma wouldn't say. But she heard it, and she internalized it, and she's been carrying that weight for 3 years. Sarah turned into the hospital parking lot, finding a spot near the emergency entrance. She put the car in park but didn't move to get out. Instead, she turned to face Mark fully. There's more. Last night, Emma told your sister something she's never told anyone. She said she thinks you wish she'd never called the school that day, that you'd rather have her mother back than have her. The sound that came out of Mark's throat was somewhere between a sob and a gasp. No, Emma knows that's not true. I've told her 1,000 times how much I love her, how she's the only thing that kept me going after Rebecca died. Children don't always hear what we say, Mark. They hear what they think we mean. They fill in the gaps with their own fears. Sarah reached over and put her hand on his arm. Emma sees how hard you work. She sees how tired you are. She sees you looking at pictures of her mother with this expression of profound loss. And somewhere in her 7-year-old brain, she's constructed a narrative where she's the reason you're in pain, where she's the burden you're carrying. Mark put his head in his hands. 3 years. His daughter had been suffering like this for 3 years, and he'd been so lost in his own grief, so focused on just surviving each day, that he'd completely missed it. What kind of father did that make him? What kind of father let his child believe she was unwanted? I need to see her, he said, lifting his head. Right now, I need to tell her. You will. But Mark, listen to me first. Sarah's voice was firm now, her teacher voice. When we go in there, Emma's going to be fragile. She's going to be scared. She finally let these feelings out, and now she's probably terrified of how you'll react. The worst thing you can do is go in there and fall apart. She needs you to be strong. She needs you to listen without making it about your guilt or your grief. Can you do that? Mark wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Every instinct in his body was screaming at him to run to his daughter, to hold her, to promise her everything would be okay. But Sarah was right. This wasn't about him. This was about Emma. About giving her the space to finally share what she'd been holding inside for so long. I can do that, he said. I have to do that. They got out of the car and walked toward the emergency entrance. The automatic doors slid open, and the smell of antiseptic and floor cleaner hit Mark like a wave of memory. The last time he'd been in a hospital was when they'd brought Rebecca's body here. When they'd made him identify her even though he'd begged them not to make him look. When he'd had to call his sister to come pick up Emma from school because he couldn't form words, couldn't drive, couldn't do anything but sit in a plastic chair and stare at the walls. Sarah seemed to sense his hesitation. Different door, she said quietly. This is the ER. Rebecca was brought to the main hospital entrance. Different building, different memories. He looked at her, startled. How did you know? Emma told Mrs. Rodriguez. She also told her that you haven't been back to a hospital since that day, that you wouldn't even let her go to her pediatrician for her checkup last year, until your sister offered to take her. Sarah's expression was gentle. You're not the only one carrying trauma, Mark. But today, right now, we're going to start helping both of you heal. They approached the reception desk, and Sarah did the talking, explaining who they were and who they were there to see. The nurse made a phone call, and within minutes, a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and graying hair, appeared through a set of double doors. Mr. Harrison? I'm Mrs. Probel. Rodriguez, the school counselor. I'm so glad you're here. She shook his hand warmly, then nodded at Sarah. Thank you for bringing him. How's Emma? Mark asked immediately. Is she okay? Can I see her? She's stable. Physically, she's fine. Emotionally, she's exhausted but relieved. Your sister is with her right now, and Emma's been asking for you every few minutes. Mrs. Rodriguez gestured for them to follow her through the doors. I want to prepare you for what you're going to see. Emma cried for almost 2 hours straight last night. She's going to look tired. Her eyes will be swollen. But Mr. Harrison, she's also going to look lighter. Because the weight she's been carrying, the secret she's been holding, she's finally let it out. They walked down a hallway lined with examination rooms. Mrs. Rodriguez stopped outside one of them, her hand on the door handle. Emma's been seeing me at school for a few weeks now. Sarah Ms. Chen noticed some warning signs and brought them to my attention. We've been doing what we call safe exploration, letting Emma talk about her feelings in small doses, building trust, creating a foundation for her to eventually share the bigger things she's been holding inside. She paused. Last night, at your sister's house, that foundation finally led to a breakthrough. Emma told your sister she couldn't sleep because she kept having the same nightmare. In the dream, her mother's car accident happens, but instead of her mother dying, Emma dies, and her mother gets to be happy again. Mark felt his knees buckle slightly. Sarah's hand was suddenly on his elbow, steadying him. Your sister handled it perfectly, Mrs. Rodriguez continued. She didn't panic. She didn't dismiss it. She just held Emma and let her talk. And once Emma started, everything came pouring out. The guilt, the belief that she killed her mother, the fear that you resented her, the nightmares, the feeling that she had to be perfect so she wouldn't be a burden, all of it. The counselor's eyes were warm but serious. Emma needs professional help, Mr. Harrison. This level of trauma and guilt isn't something that will resolve with just a few conversations. She needs therapy, regular sessions with someone trained in childhood grief and trauma. Whatever she needs, Mark said immediately. I don't care what it costs. I don't care how many appointments. Whatever Emma needs to heal, she gets it. Mrs. Rodriguez smiled. That's exactly what she needs to hear from you. Now, before we go in, I need you to understand something important. Emma is 7 years old. She doesn't have the emotional vocabulary to process complex feelings like survivor's guilt or traumatic grief. When she talks to you, she's going to use simple words to describe very complicated emotions. Your job is to listen and validate, not to correct or explain. If she says something that isn't factually true, like saying the accident was her fault, you don't argue with her logic. You acknowledge her feeling, and then you gently offer truth. Does that make sense? Mark nodded, even though his brain felt like it was moving through molasses. Nothing about this felt real. An hour ago, he'd woken up confused and mildly hungover. Now he was standing outside a hospital room, about to have the most important conversation of his life with his 7-year-old daughter. One more thing, Sarah said softly. I know I'm not family, and I don't want to overstep, but Emma asked for me to be here too. She wanted someone who wasn't family, someone neutral, someone who she felt safe with. If you're not comfortable with that, stay, Mark said immediately. please. You've done more for my daughter in the past few weeks than I've managed to do in 3 years. If Emma wants you here, then you should be here." Mrs. Rodriguez opened the door, and Mark's heart nearly stopped. Emma was sitting on a hospital bed, still in her pajamas from the sleepover, her small frame dwarfed by the white sheets. His sister Jennifer sat beside her, holding her hand. Emma's face was exactly as the counselor had described: swollen eyes, tear-stained cheeks, exhausted beyond measure. But when she saw Mark, her whole face crumpled. "Daddy," she whispered, and that one word held so much pain and hope and fear that Mark felt something break open in his chest. He crossed the room in 3 strides and gathered her into his arms, feeling her small body shake with fresh sobs. "I've got you, baby. I've got you. I'm here. I'm right here." "I'm sorry," Emma cried into his shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Daddy. I didn't mean to make Mommy die. I didn't mean to ruin everything. I'm sorry I'm not good enough. I'm sorry you have to take care of me. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Each apology was a knife in Mark's heart. He held his daughter tighter, rocking her gently, and looked over her head at Sarah and Mrs. Rodriguez. They both nodded encouragingly. He could do this. He had to do this. "Emma, sweetheart, look at me." He pulled back just enough to see her face, to let her see his. "What happened to Mommy was an accident. A terrible, horrible accident. But it was not your fault. Do you hear me? It was not your fault." "But I called the school," Emma hiccuped. "I said my tummy hurt. If I hadn't called, Mommy wouldn't have been on that road. She wouldn't have." She couldn't finish the sentence, dissolving into tears again. Mark cupped her face in his hands, his own tears falling freely now. "If you hadn't called, Mommy would have been on a different road at a different time, and something else might have happened. Or nothing might have happened. We can't know, Emma. We can't ever know. But here's what I do know, what I need you to understand. I would never, ever wish you hadn't been born. I would never trade you for anything or anyone, not even Mommy. Because you, Emma Marie Harrison, are the best thing that ever happened to me. You're not a burden. You're not too much. You're not the reason I'm sad. You're the reason I get up every morning. You're the reason I'm still here." Emma's sobs began to quiet, her breathing still hitched but calmer. "Really? Really? And I'm so sorry I didn't see how much you were hurting. I'm sorry I didn't make you feel safe enough to tell me these things. I'm sorry I was so lost in missing Mommy that I didn't see my beautiful daughter was drowning right in front of me." Sarah stepped forward then, kneeling beside the bed. "Emma, do you remember what we talked about in our lunch sessions? About how sometimes our brains tell us stories that aren't true? Stories that feel true because we're scared or sad but aren't actually real?" Emma nodded, wiping her nose on her pajama sleeve. "Your brain has been telling you a story about being responsible for your mom's accident, about your dad wishing you weren't here. But those are scared brain stories. They're not true stories. And now we're going to work on replacing those scared brain stories with truth stories. Stories about how much your dad loves you, about how accidents aren't anyone's fault, about how it's okay to be sad and okay to talk about hard things." "Will the bad dreams stop?" Emma asked in a small voice. "With help, yes," Mrs. Rodriguez said, moving to stand on the other side of the bed. "Your dad and I are going to find you a special doctor, someone who helps kids work through big feelings and scary thoughts. It might take some time, but yes, the bad dreams will get better." Emma looked at her father, her eyes searching his face for something, permission maybe, or reassurance. "Can Ms. Chen still have lunch with me sometimes, even if I'm seeing the special doctor?" Sarah smiled, and Mark saw genuine affection in her expression. "Absolutely. I'm not going anywhere, Emma. I'll still be your teacher, and I'll still check in on you every day. And your dad and I are going to work together to make sure you get everything you need." Mark looked at Sarah, this woman who'd stayed up all night in his kitchen waiting to deliver devastating news with compassion, who'd driven him to the hospital and held him steady when he almost fell apart, who'd somehow managed to see his daughter's pain when he'd been too blind with his own grief to notice. He'd spent 3 years building walls around himself and Emma, thinking he was protecting them both, when all he'd really done was trap them each in their own separate prisons of grief. Jennifer stood up, squeezing Emma's foot gently. "I'm going to go get us all some breakfast from the cafeteria. Emma, what do you want, pancakes or French toast? Can I have both?" Emma asked tentatively, and Mark felt a surge of hope at the question. She was asking for something. She was letting herself want something. "You can have both," Jennifer said firmly. "You can have whatever you want, sweetheart." As Jennifer left the room, Mrs. Rodriguez gathered her things. I'm going to step out and give you some privacy, Mr. Bruss. Harrison. I'll have my office send you a list of recommended child therapists this afternoon. In the meantime, just be together. Talk, listen. Start rebuilding the bridge between you. When the counselor left, it was just Mark, Emma, and Sarah in the quiet hospital room. Emma was still in Mark's arms, but calmer now, her breathing steady. She pulled back and looked at Sarah with curious eyes. Ms. Chen, why are you wearing my dad's shirt? Sarah laughed, a real laugh that broke some of the tension in the room. That's a long story, kiddo. Let's just say your dad needed a friend last night. And sometimes being a friend means wearing borrowed clothes and making coffee at 3 in the morning. Are you going to be my dad's friend now? Emma asked. He doesn't have very many friends. He mostly just works and takes care of me. Mark felt his face flush, but Sarah just nodded seriously. I'd like to be your dad's friend, if he'll let me. And maybe in the process, we can all be friends. Your dad, and you, and me. How does that sound? Emma considered this, her young face thoughtful. Then she looked up at Mark. Is that okay, Daddy? Can Miss Chen be our friend? Mark met Sarah's eyes over Emma's head. In them, he saw kindness and understanding and something that looked like hope. He'd spent 3 years shutting people out, convinced that he and Emma only needed each other. But maybe that had been wrong. Maybe healing didn't mean doing it alone. Maybe letting people in wasn't a weakness, but a strength. Yeah, sweetheart, he said softly. That's more than okay.